This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Interested in learning more about investing in startups, launching a new startup and need to raise funding? The Startup Funding Espresso is a daily podcast in a short, concise format delivered to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. In the time it takes to drink an espresso, you can learn about startup funding. To subscribe, go to investorconnect.org and put your email into the pop-up box. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Karen Vandiver, owner of New Healthworks and founder of Mindful Meditation Training Institute. New Healthworks services include corporate and executive coaching, professional telehealth services, and mindful meditation training. It provides in-office therapy in Harker Heights and Austin, Texas. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us about your background. What did you do before founding New Healthworks?
I did a lot of hospital work as an individual therapist along with a family therapist, and I did group therapy. I had a lot of really good clinical training from some of the best that I had heard of in that area and just fell in love with therapy. So it was just, like I said, I had really good teachers. And I saw results. and was just amazed at what could happen. I started programs also for hospitals. So I started an inpatient codependency treatment program when that was the big thing, for a while. And then I started a 12-step codependency group for the hospital and an outpatient group. So I had created all of those programs for one hospital, and I've done that for other hospitals as well, creating programs. Then I went into individual therapy, a private practice. And so my private practice grew in Austin, and I loved it. And that's what I did before New Healthworks. I moved to the Harker Heights area when my mom was dying and started that practice. And it began to overflow. So I hired 4 therapists, and that gave birth to New Healthworks.
Great. So what led you to start working this space to begin with?
Well, that's an interesting question. Well, the first thing that happened is after I gave birth to my daughter, I had trouble going to sleep. And so I was in Walden Books, and I looked at these recordings, these cassette tapes, and saw one that said sleep hypnosis. So I bought it, took it home, and it worked.
Well, great. So
the other thing that happened, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The other thing that happened was because of the sleep hypnosis thing, I was just really excited about working with the brain and all the possibilities, which we didn't have research at that time to support it, but now we do. So I was gone to a 4-day workshop on hypnosis in Houston, and Ernest Rosen had recordings there called Listening to Your Symptom. And at that time, I had warts on my face during graduate school, which was not a lot of fun. And I'd had them for a year and a half and had gone to a dermatologist for that year and a half, and nothing had changed. So I bought his recording called Listening to Your Symptom, brought it home, did the protocol, was able to identify a situation that was symbolic, and I resolved the situation, and in 4 days my warts were gone.
Wow.
So I became just delighted and wanted to know more.
Well, great. So what's your advice for people investing in this space? What do you tell them to do before they write that check?
There better be somebody clinical on board, or you can have a lot of litigation against you.
Well, let's talk about the industry in general. Where do you see it going from here?
Telehealth?
Yes.
Yeah, which, I know that's the new thing now, and it's going hugely all over the world, not just here in America. So I've seen it in India and all kind of places, and I see people getting on board from different states when we weren't allowed to do that. But now you can have an LLC, and you can be a counseling center, and you can hire therapists in other states now. So that's one way of addressing the issue of not being able to hire people except in your state, which is how we're kind of limited now as therapists in terms of that, unless you have an LLC.
You recommend that for people in your situation, is to go ahead and put their business inside an LLC company, or do you?
Yes, I would recommend that.
Okay, great. And there's telehealth is, of course, as you said, a big thing is going everywhere. Do you see it gaining more traction in some applications over others? And do you see it not gaining traction in certain spaces?
Like I said, I haven't really looked at it that seriously because I feel comfortable in my own skin, and I feel like what I offer is unique and very well documented. But yeah, I don't know if I could answer that question. I just know I've just heard things, and I've never really gone into it to see it. But we have had things in the past like that, where this growing idea that someone has without it being clinically explored has led to a lot of litigation, and that was back in the 90s, I believe, and a lot of litigation back then because hypnosis was being used inaccurately and led to all this litigation. So you do have to be careful, and a lot of people lost their licenses who were not paying attention to the rules. So it was really, people who didn't know how to do hypnosis. And in hypnosis, you're in a vulnerable state because you've activated the alpha state, which is a state of consciousness where you're open to ideas, to seeing things in a different way. So if someone plants an idea that something happened, which is why you have the symptoms you have, then the person will take it in as the truth. And that was what happened back in the 90s. So it was, and because I value clinical training so much, I stayed away from it, but I saw other people really get hurt by that movement.
Right. Well, aside from litigation, what are the other challenges in this space?
Staying on par with the research that's being done, like the National Institutes of Health have all these different studies on meditation, which we didn't have before. And I started meditation because of hypnosis. So I was using hypnosis as a way to meditate. And then I met a neurologist from India in Austin, and he was very well trained, and he understood the science behind it, even though we didn't have, access to research yet. He understood what was going on in the brain, and he is the person that made me take it seriously and start doing meditation back in the 90s.
Well,
so now we have all this research showing what happens in the brain when you meditate, and that, you're making new neurons, which become new brain cells, and you're increasing your melatonin for sleep, your serotonin for motivation and interest, so you're not depressed. Your dopamine is increased, and so that's the bliss hormone, and you don't have anxiety.
I see. Okay. So quite a bit is happening there, and it seems like they have a lot more clinical data on it now. And so it seems like that can be quite useful in your work.
Yes. And I like to find out that kind of stuff so people know it's real and they have facts.
Great. Well, tell us more about New Healthworks and how do you fit into the overall landscape there?
Well, we have a lot of, but because I started it in Harker Heights, where the military is, and the bulk of the clients there are military. The bulk of my clients in Austin are not. But, there's a lot of PTSD and trauma. And so we deal with a lot of really serious things. And, sometimes there's hospitalization involved based on the level of severity. See a lot of families because of deployments and that sort of thing. And so, it's if you're coming into my practice, I would want to train them so that I know they have the clinical skills to deal with severe cases.
And so aside from the severe cases, what else do you tend to see in your practice?
Well, it's some really exciting things happen. Like I've seen people that you wouldn't think would heal at all. Now, this was a case in Austin that a psychiatrist sent to me, but the person had been in and out of hospitals multiple times a year for 5 years. And in working with me, in the very first session, we were able to uncover the trauma that had been buried long ago. And in 6 months, she was off all her medication. She never went back to the hospital, and she got a degree and has a professional career.
Well, that's great. Sound like a big win there as well. So where do you plan to take your practice going forward? Where do you think the technology or the research is going to move at this point?
I really don't know. I think more clinical trials are being done to see what other parts of the brain are involved and what other kind of body chemistry is involved. So these are about 5 studies that I was sharing with you that started in about 2005, because I think the universities just got all of this brain scan stuff that would allow them to do the research. So I think that's going to expand and go into other areas. So universities are going to be doing more of that than just the hospitals.
And what did you see during the COVID pandemic? How did that impact your work?
Well, it didn't really, but I thought it would, and I was scared. But I was grateful because it didn't really impact my work.
Okay. But COVID, it didn't really have a psychological impact on any of your patients. It was just a flu-like symptom, and it had a physiological impact, but not a psychological one. Is that right?
Well, some people it had a psychological impact, and others it didn't. I mean, I can't say that it categorically was one, it went one way.
It seemed like people being sequestered at home for a long period of time weighed on some people. Did you see any impact of that in your area?
I did see that, because when it finally lifted and people had their vaccinations, people cried because they were free again and we were back to normal. And so there was this relief, and they had anxiety they didn't know that they had. So I saw more of that than, people struggling during the pandemic.
Do you think people came out stronger for that experience? We can survive this. We know how to do this now. I think some cultures have gone through these kind of pandemics before, mostly in Asia, but we have not gone through one in a long, long time. And so I think most people weren't quite prepared for it. But I think, next time we go around, I think we'll be a lot better prepared for it. What's your take on that?
No, I agree with you. I think, if it happened again, those of us who've been through it, we'll know that we can make it. We'll know that adjustments need to be made, and there may be lessons we learned, like the ice age in Texas, that week of ice and lives that were lost. So it was really tragic.
Yeah, we did have a tough week there in February when everything froze over for a full week. Single digit temperatures froze our power grid, and natural gas, everything was frozen. And so it was quite the scene there to see the state in such a place, because we've never been there before. Hopefully we won't be there again. But did you have any fallout from that week of experience in your area?
Yes, I did, from clients. It was really scary for them, and some of them, they were without heat for days. And so, yeah, and other people died. I do know about people that died during that time.
From lack of power and lack of heat?
Yeah, they froze to death.
Oh, wow. So I guess, what else should we cover that we haven't at this point?
I just hope that people take it seriously. Some people think you're just sitting there talking and you're just having a conversation, which is not true. You're sitting there talking, and yes, you're connecting with a person, but you're also paying attention to symptoms, and you're also paying attention to what direction to go with it and how severe it is. And if you don't know how to deal with the severity, and I've run into this with clinicians who didn't have any clinical training, would call, if my friends would call me if they didn't have clinical training and ask, this is the diagnosis I'm looking at, what do you think? And sometimes it was right, but sometimes it was too severe, or sometimes it was too mild, so they would call to make sure, they were getting the diagnosis right and whether they had the skills to treat that person.
Great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Oh, well, they can call. I have a 1-800 number on my website, so they can call that number. Yeah.
And your website is KarenVandiver.com?
That's true. That's
cool.
Correct.
Well, great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes, and want to thank you for joining us today, and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate being on the show.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.